My daughter-in-law didn't know I owned the cottage. Her family had been vacationing at every summer for 6 years. She stood in my own kitchen, the one I paid for, and told my son, "Get your mother out of here before she ruins Thanksgiving. We don't need some broke old woman guilt-tripping us all weekend." I set down the pie I'd carried from Mississauga. I drove home that night in the dark along the 401, and I didn't cry. I was doing the math. By the end of the month, they'd learn exactly what I'd been to them all along. I'm so glad you've stayed with me. Please give this a like, listen to my story right through to the end, and tell me which town you're listening from, because I do love seeing how far these stories travel. I never told my son Marcus the truth about my money. Why would I? For 31 years, I worked as an actuary for one of the big insurance firms downtown. The kind of job nobody understands and everybody assumes pays modestly. It does not pay modestly. After my Gordon passed 8 years ago, the work became the thing that got me out of bed. I didn't need most of what I earned, so I quietly did what mothers do. When Marcus and his wife Tessa found the lake house up in Muskoka that they fell in love with, the one they could never have afforded on a high school teacher's salary and her on-again, off-again interior decorating, I bought it. I paid the whole thing, cash, near enough. I let them believe I'd co-signed and helped a little with the deposit. They had no idea the deed sat in my name alone, in a folder in my safety deposit box at the credit union on Lakeshore. I lived simply in my condo in Mississauga, the same one Gordon and I bought in 1994. I drove up to the cottage maybe 4 times a summer, always invited, always polite, always bringing something. A butter tart square, a casserole. I was careful never to overstay. Tessa was 34, pretty and brittle, the sort of woman who smiled with her mouth and watched you with her eyes. I told myself it was just her way. Some people run cold. Marcus seemed content, and content was all I'd ever wanted for my boy. The first crack showed up 2 summers back, though I didn't recognize it for what it was. I'd come up for the August long weekend and overheard Tessa on the dock with her sister. "No, his mother can't help with anything. She's just scraping by on her pension, poor thing. We basically carry her." I stood at the screen door with a tray of iced tea I'd made, and I felt something cold slide down through me. Poor thing. They thought I was a burden hanging off the edge of their lives. I set the tray on the counter and I didn't say a word. It got worse the way these things do. Slowly and then all at once. Last spring I drove up unannounced to drop off Marcus's old hockey trophies he'd asked me to dig out of storage. Through the kitchen window I heard Tessa on the phone. "We can't carry his mother forever. She's got nothing. She contributes nothing. And frankly, she just makes everything awkward. Marcus needs to set a boundary." I left the box of trophies on the porch and drove the 2.5 hours home without stopping once. Then came Thanksgiving. We do it in October here, the way we always have, and I'd been invited up to the cottage like every year. I made the pumpkin pie from Gordon's mother's recipe, the one Marcus loved as a little boy, and I drove up Saturday afternoon. Tessa opened the door and her whole face fell when she saw me. "Oh, you're here." "It's Thanksgiving, dear," I said. "I'm right on time." She didn't move to let me in. Behind her I could see new furniture, a leather sectional, one of those enormous televisions. There was a brochure on the counter for a resort in Punta Cana. All this, while Marcus had told me on the phone they were stretched thin and might have to refinance. Inside, things were tense. Marcus was there this time, but quiet, sanding something at the workbench, not meeting my eye. Tessa kept pulling him into the mudroom to whisper. When we finally sat down to eat, she barely touched her plate. "Helen," Marcus started and then stopped, looking at the table. "We've been talking," Tessa cut in, her voice sharp. "We think you should look into one of those retirement residences. The nice ones, with activities." "You want me to move into a home?" I said, calmer than I felt. "A retirement community," she corrected, as though that softened it. "You're getting older. Living alone in that old condo, it isn't safe. And honestly, Helen, we need our space." We're trying to start a family, and having you up here all the time, depending on us, it's a lot. Depending on them. The word landed somewhere deep and cold in my chest. Don't make this difficult, Tessa snapped. We can't be your whole social life. We have our own future to think about. You need to accept that you're becoming a burden. And Marcus, my only child, the boy I raised alone after his father died, said nothing. He just stared at the wood grain of the table I had paid for. I stood up slowly and gathered my purse. My hands were steady. 31 years of presenting risk models to boards full of men who'd assumed I was the coffee girl had taught me how to keep my face still. I understand perfectly, I said, and that's when Tessa made her mistake. Maybe my calm provoked her. She stood up too, her face twisting. Good. Because frankly, we don't need some broke old woman guilt-tripping us all weekend. Marcus, tell her, we don't need this. Get your mother out of here before she ruins Thanksgiving. The words hung in the air like smoke. Marcus went pale. Tessa, I mean it. Out. I looked at my son. He looked at the floor. I walked to the door, took my coat off the hook, and left without another word. The drive back down Highway 11 was dark and long, and I expected to fall apart somewhere around Barry. I didn't. My mind was clear and quiet and busy. When had I lost him? Or had I ever truly had him? I pulled into my parking garage and sat in the dark with the engine ticking as it cooled. Then I went up, made a cup of tea I didn't drink, and sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop and the files. The real ones. The cottage on Echo Bay Road, assessed at $490,000. Title holder, Helen Margaret Whitfield. Me. Purchase price 3 years prior, paid in full from the proceeds of Gordon's life insurance and my own savings. Property taxes, $11,000 a year, paid by automatic withdrawal from my account, an account I'd set up to look as though the funds came from M. Whitfield Holdings. Marcus thought he was paying those taxes. He wasn't. He was sending money to me, and I was paying the township. I sat back and let it settle. They were living their golden summers in my house, calling me a broke old woman, and they had no idea. What frightened me wasn't the money. I could lose every dollar and still be fine. What frightened me was losing Marcus for good, because what I was beginning to consider, there'd be no walking it back. I reached for the phone twice to call him and explain, and twice I put it down. He stood there while his wife called me a beggar and ordered him to throw me out of a cottage I owned, and he'd said nothing. By the time the sun came up over the lake at the far edge of the city, I'd made my decision. I'd give him one chance. One. If he called to apologize, to stand up for me, to say plainly that what she'd done was wrong, then maybe we could begin again. If he didn't, I'd take back what was mine, and I'd do it properly. Gordon's photograph watched me from the bookshelf. What would you do? I asked him. He'd always been clear on this. Love them, Helen, but don't ever let them walk on you. Respect runs both ways, or it doesn't run at all. My phone stayed silent all of Sunday. Monday morning I called my office and took 2 weeks of the vacation I never used. Then I called Daniel Okonkwo, the lawyer who'd handled Gordon's estate and looked after my affairs ever since. Helen, good to hear your voice. What can I do? Daniel, I need you to pull the title on the Echo Bay property. I want to understand my options. There was a pause. He was sharp enough to know that wasn't a casual question. Is everything all right? I'm just exploring possibilities. Can we meet? Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Tuesday morning, still no call from my son. I put on the navy suit I used to wear for the meetings that mattered, and I drove downtown. Daniel had the documents spread across his desk. Walk me through it, he said gently. So I told him everything. The secret payments, the years of it, Tessa's outburst, Marcus's silence. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back. Helen, I have to ask, what outcome do you actually want? I want my son to grow a spine, I said, and I want his wife to learn that there are consequences. And if he doesn't grow that spine, I met his eyes, then I want back what is mine. He nodded slowly. Legally, you're standing on solid ground. The property is yours outright. You could give them notice to vacate whenever you choose. But Helen, this will likely cost you your relationship with your son. It's already gone, Daniel. I'm just the only one who knows it yet. For 2 hours we built a plan. Not out of rage. I couldn't afford rage. Out of cold, clear necessity. As I left his office, my phone finally buzzed. My heart leapt. Marcus. But it wasn't Marcus. It was Tessa. Marcus says you're sulking. You owe us an apology for storming off and embarrassing everyone. We're willing to move past it this once, but don't be so dramatic again. We'll see you at the cottage next long weekend if you want to make things right. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Daniel with one line. Proceed with the documentation. That Thursday, I did something I'd never done in my life. I drove up early and parked down the road from the cottage where I could see without being seen. At 8:15, Marcus left for the school in his old Corolla, shoulders bent, tie crooked. He looked exhausted. Good, I thought, and then hated myself a little for thinking it. Around 10, Tessa came out in athletic wear that cost more than the car her husband drove, climbed into a white Audi I knew his salary couldn't touch, and headed into Huntsville. I followed at a distance. She met two friends for brunch at a place on the main street, laughed, showed off a new bag, and paid with a card. This was a woman who told her sister they could barely keep their heads above water. I took photographs. Timestamps. Daniel had been clear. If you want to protect yourself, you establish that they're financially stable without you. It kills any argument that you're putting them in hardship. Friday, Daniel called. I had someone pull what's publicly available, Helen. You need to see this. In his office an hour later, he slid a folder across the desk. Their joint account showed Marcus's pay going in like clockwork, but there were withdrawals. Cash. 3,000 here, 4 there, always a few days before the property taxes were supposedly due. They're pulling money out, Daniel said quietly, right before transferring what they think are the taxes to your account. Then your automatic withdrawal actually covers the township. Helen, they think they're paying 11,000 a year. They're paying you, and most of it never reaches anything. It's going to, well, brunches and bags. Then he showed me Tessa's personal account, $41,000. Her own savings kept separate while she told the world they were drowning. My phone rang in his office. Marcus. I let it go to voicemail and then played it on speaker, because I wanted Daniel to hear it too. Mom, Tessa told me she texted you. Look, the weekend got tense, I know. We're under a lot of stress with the cottage and everything. Maybe we all just need some space. Can you take a break from coming up for a while? Just for a bit. Call me. Not an apology. Not one word about what his wife had said. Just a request that I disappear quietly. Daniel watched me. You have your answer. I do, I said. Register the change of title. Today. We drove to the land registry office together. The clerk, a kind-faced woman about my age, processed it without fuss. Just confirming current ownership of record, she said. Echo Bay Road. Helen Margaret Whitfield, sole owner. I signed. My signature felt heavier than usual. It'll be live in the system Monday, she said. I assumed they'd never check. I was wrong. Saturday evening, my phone went off like a fire alarm. Marcus. Mom, what is going on? Tessa got an alert from one of those property apps, and it says, your name is on the cottage. Then Tessa, what kind of sick game are you playing? That's OUR Cottage. Then Marcus again. Call me right now. This has to be a mistake. 20-some messages in 10 minutes. I turned the phone off, poured myself a small glass of wine, and sat in my quiet condo. The point of no return had just slipped past behind me, and the truth was I didn't want to go back. Sunday morning there were 60-some messages and a dozen missed calls. I called Daniel first. They know. I gathered. Tessa left 3 voicemails at your office, apparently. Creative vocabulary. Helen, are you ready? It gets worse before it gets better. I'm ready. What's next? A formal notice. 30 days to vacate or to negotiate a lease. More than the law requires, but it shows good faith. Send it. At noon, someone pounded on my door. Not knocked. Pounded. Through the peephole, the two of them, red in the face. I opened the door but left the chain on. You need to lower your voices before we talk. You're trying to steal our cottage, Tessa shrieked. Lower your voice or I close this door. My neighbors don't need the show. Marcus looked like he'd been crying, and that nearly broke me. Almost. Mom, please, just explain. There's been a mistake. The registry says you own it. There's no mistake, Marcus. I do own it. I always have. I bought it for you 3 years ago. The color drained out of his face. What? I paid for it. All of it. And the taxes you think you've been paying me, not the township. I've been covering it. That's not possible, he whispered. We don't have that kind of money. You don't, I said. I do. I made a great deal more than you ever knew, Marcus. For years. I'm a senior actuary. I never told you because I didn't want money to poison things between us. The irony of that sat heavy in the doorway. Tessa recovered first, shock hardening into calculation. You've been lying to us. This is elder. This is some kind of manipulation. I gave you a home, I said quietly. And on Thanksgiving you called me a broke old woman and told my son to throw me out. So, Marcus, say something, she demanded. But Marcus was staring at me as if he'd never seen me before. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Would it have changed what happened at that table? Would you have defended me? Silence. Then Daniel's voice, calm, behind them on the stairs. I hadn't heard him come up. Mr. and Mrs. Whitfield, I have your notice here. 30 days to vacate or to discuss a lease. I'd suggest you speak to your own counsel. Tessa lunged toward the door and Marcus caught her arm. We'll sue. We have rights. We've put our life into that place. You'll have your $41,000 in savings to cover first and last somewhere, I said. The room went very still. How do you know about? I'm an actuary, dear. Knowing what numbers mean is the whole job. They left. Tessa was still shouting threats from the stairwell. Marcus said nothing, the envelope shaking in his hand. Daniel told me to take a few days, to let them sit with it, to route everything through him. He was right. I drove up to a little inn in Collingwood and turned my phone off. For 4 days I walked the harbor, ate proper meals, slept, and tried to remember who I was before I became the burden. Helen Whitfield. I'd built a career when women didn't. I'd buried a husband and raised a boy alone. I was not fragile, and I would not be handled as though I were. Friday, I came home to an envelope taped to my door. Marcus's handwriting, not Tessa's. Mom, please, just you and me. No lawyers, no Tessa. There's a Tim Hortons by the old arena, the one we used to go to after my games. Saturday, 2 o'clock. I'm begging you. I need to understand, Marcus. I read it 3 times looking for the trick. But it sounded like my boy. I got there 5 minutes early. He was already in the corner, looking like he hadn't slept since the day I left the cottage. 5 minutes, Marcus. She doesn't know I'm here, he said immediately. I told her I was meeting a friend from work. So you're lying to her now, too. He flinched. Mom, I don't know what to believe about anything anymore. The truth is simple. I bought you a cottage. Your wife called me a beggar. You said nothing. And now I'm taking back what's mine. It's not that simple. His voice cracked. I was in shock. I should have stood up for you, I know that. But Tessa, her mother's sick, her work's a mess. We're trying for a baby, are you? Because she mentioned a baby on my doorstep when it suited her argument. He went red. She was upset. He reached across the little table for my hand. I drew it back. Tell me what you want, Mom. An apology? We'll both apologize. Money? We'll pay you back. With what? Her savings she's been hiding? His mouth opened and shut. You really did dig into us. I protected myself. You made that necessary. Mom, where are we supposed to go? We can't afford rent up there. You'll manage. People do. I stood. Marcus, when your father died, you were 25. Do you remember what you said to me? He blinked. You took my hands and you said, I'm the man of the family now, Mom. You'll never be alone. Where was that man at the table on Thanksgiving? The tears came then, sliding down his face. I'm sorry. God, Mom, I'm so sorry. Sorry isn't enough anymore, I said, and I walked out and left him there, and I made it to the parking lot before my own tears came. That night, I called my oldest friend Roberta, who'd moved out to Kelowna years ago, but who I've loved since we were 18. I told her all of it. She was quiet, and then she was furious, and then she said something that loosened a knot in my chest. Helen, half the women our age let our kids walk all over us because we're terrified of losing them, but you can't lose what you never really had. I'm proud of you. A few days later, a woman from the Regional Family Mediation Service called. Marcus had requested mediation. I told her I'd speak to my lawyer. Daniel was skeptical. It only works if both sides come in good faith. Will Tessa? No. But if she doesn't, a neutral third party will see it and write it down. He almost smiled, always thinking like an actuary. The mediation was on a Friday in a beige room downtown with a box of tissues in the middle of the table like a centerpiece. Both of them came. Marcus looked wrecked. Tessa wore pearls and a soft pink blouse, hair done, the very picture of a reasonable woman. She apologized first, sweetly, eyes wide and wet. I was having a terrible month, Helen. I took it out on you, and that was wrong. I hope you can forgive me. Marcus apologized too, and his at least sounded real. I thanked them both, evenly. Then Tessa leaned in. I'd like to propose something. If Helen really is the owner, perhaps we simply formalize what was happening. We keep paying, real payments this time, and we buy the cottage from her over time. The deed transfers when we've paid, say, 70%. It sounded almost reasonable. That was the danger of her. Daniel set his pen down. So you'd like Helen to hand you a $500,000 property for a discount, no down payment, no credit check, and no legal protection for her as lender. Is that the proposal? It's her son's family. Surely, family matters more than money. Family runs both ways, I said. The mediator suggested a lease. Daniel asked what rent. Market for a place like that on the lake is north of $3,000 a month, she said. Tessa's mask slipped. That's absurd. We can't afford that. You have $41,000 in savings, I said. The room went silent, and then Tessa came apart. She stood up, the pink blouse and the pearls and the soft voice all falling away at once. You vindictive old woman. You can't stand that he chose me, that he has his own life, so you're trying to destroy us. You bought that cottage in secret so you'd always have a leash on him, so he'd always be dependent on you. I bought it so my son would have a home he couldn't afford on his own, I said, ice in my voice. I asked for nothing but basic respect. You couldn't manage even that because you don't have it in you. The mediator tried to settle her. Tessa wouldn't be settled. You want the truth? You're a sad, lonely old woman who tried to buy her son's love because there's nothing else in your life. No friends, no purpose, just sad little casseroles and Sunday phone calls. Marcus doesn't need you. He has a real family now. Marcus was the color of paper. Tessa, stop. She needs to hear it. I gathered my purse, hands steady. Daniel, we're done. Agreed. Running away again, Tessa called after me. Just like Thanksgiving. I turned at the door. I gave you a home. You gave me contempt. The notice stands. 3 weeks. In the elevator, I started to shake, and Daniel put a steadying hand on my shoulder. She showed her true face. She did, he said, and the mediator has to write a report. This only helps you. But I wasn't thinking about the report. I was thinking about my son, still sitting in that room with her. Would he finally see it? The last confrontation came on day 29. Daniel had everything ready. The eviction would be enforceable the next morning. I'd even found them a sensible 2-bedroom in Huntsville, well within their actual means, and emailed Marcus the listing. No reply. I spent the day at the office, catching up, staying busy. At 6, my assistant buzzed. Helen, there are 2 people here. No appointment. I knew before she said it. Send them in. This was not the Tessa for mediation. No pearls. Jeans and a hoodie, her face swollen from real crying. Marcus looked worse, hollow-eyed and gray. My office has always been my ground, floor-to-ceiling windows over the city. the wall of credentials, the desk where I'd close deals worth more than that cottage. You have 15 minutes, I said. I have dinner plans, I said. I have dinner plans. I didn't. They didn't need to know that. Tessa spoke first, and for once, she sounded like a person and not a performance. Helen, I found something tonight while I was packing. I need to show you. She slid her phone across the desk. A bank statement. One highlighted line. A transfer to M. Whitfield Holdings, $920 dated 3 years back, and then again every single month since. I don't understand, I said slowly. Marcus has been paying, Tessa said, her voice thin. The real taxes and more. He has an account I never knew about. I looked at my son. He was staring at his hands. I set it up right after we moved in, he said quietly. You told me you'd help with the deposit. I figured you meant a few thousand. Then I saw the closing papers. You'd paid for the whole thing. Mom, I couldn't just take that. I called the credit union. They told me you held the title and they gave me an account to send money to, so I've been sending it. 900 and change every month. I picked up tutoring, coaching, marking exams for other teachers on the side. Tessa thought I was avoiding her. I was working. Tessa made a sound that was half a laugh and half a sob. We fought about money for 3 years. I thought he was hiding something terrible. I thought he might be gambling. I thought he might be seeing someone. He wouldn't tell me where it was going, and I blamed you. I built a whole story in my head where you were a leech, and I poured all of it onto you. I was trying to keep some dignity, Marcus said, his voice breaking. I couldn't stand being a charity case, so I worked myself into the ground trying to pay you back, and I wrecked my marriage doing it. And then I sat at that table and let her call you a beggar. And I, Tessa whispered, became something monstrous over a story that wasn't even true. I turned to my computer and pulled up the holdings account I'd half forgotten I even had. There it was, 36 deposits, $920 each. More than $33,000 my son had sent me in secret, going toward a debt I never asked him to pay. Why didn't you tell me, I said, and my voice wasn't steady anymore. Because you'd have told me to stop, he said. And I needed to do it. For me. I looked at him properly, the dark circles, the weight he'd lost, the exhaustion coming off him in waves. You worked yourself sick repaying a gift I gave freely. It didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a debt I owed. You owed me nothing but respect. That's all I ever wanted. I know that now. I should have known it at that table. I should have stood up the second she said it, no matter what. That part's on me, not on Tessa, not on the stress. On me. And finally, he understood. The eviction, Tessa started. It stands, for now, I said. You're out of the cottage tomorrow. They both seemed to fold in on themselves. But, I went on, you're moving into that 2-bedroom in Huntsville. I'll rent it to you at $1,400 a month, lease in your names until you're back on your feet. Marcus, you're going to stop the tutoring and the coaching and all of it. You're going to sleep. You're going to save your marriage. Understood? He nodded, unable to speak. And Tessa, I held her eyes. You and I are going to have lunch. Just the two of us, once a month. No, Marcus. We're going to learn to speak to each other like grown women. The first time you ever speak to me again, the way you did on Thanksgiving, we are finished. No third chance. Are we clear? Yes, she said. Crystal. I swear it. The cottage I'm selling. The market's strong. I'll get a fair price. Half the proceeds go into a trust for your children when they come, my grandchildren. The other half is mine. That's more than fair, Daniel said from the doorway. I'd phoned him when they walked in. I wanted a witness. Marcus crossed the room and did something he hadn't done since he was a boy. He put his arms around me. I'm so sorry, Mom, for all of it. I held my son and let myself cry. After a moment, Tessa stood there, uncertain. Helen, I know I've no right to ask, but... I opened my other arm. The cottage sold in 5 days, $18,000 over asking, to a young family from Ottawa with 2 kids and a black lab. After the remaining costs, I was left with a little over $470,000. I set up 2 trusts with my advisor, 300,000 for the grandchildren who weren't here yet, for school and weddings and first homes, so they'd never have to grind themselves down the way their father had. 100,000 split among the things Gordon and I always gave to: the food bank, the women's shelter in the city, the literacy program at the library where I'd taught new Canadians to read on Saturday mornings for years. The rest was mine. There was one piece left. The landlord of that little Huntsville townhouse was retiring to Victoria and asked if I cared to buy it. After some back and forth, we settled at $290,000, and I bought it. Then I called Marcus and Tessa to my condo. They came in braced for more bad news. Instead, I handed them a folder. "What's this?" Marcus asked. "The deed to the townhouse. Both your names." Tessa's hands started to shake. "Helen, we can't. You can't. You will. But there are conditions." "Anything," Marcus said. There were 5. 1. They keep paying $1,400 a month, but it would go into a savings account in their names, and when it reached $50,000, it was theirs. An emergency fund, a cushion, whatever they needed. 2. Marcus would see a counselor every week to deal with whatever drove him to work himself into the ground rather than accept help. "Already started," he said, eyes wet, 3 sessions in. 3. Tessa would go back and finish the design diploma she'd abandoned. I'd cover it. She cried openly at that. "Why? After everything I said?" "Because you're my daughter-in-law. Because you're trying. Because I can afford it, and I'd rather invest in this family than nurse a grudge." "But Tessa," I waited until she looked at me. "If you ever disrespect me like that again, we're done, and I mean it." "Never again," she said. "I swear to you." 4. Sunday dinners, twice a month, one at their table and one at mine, until this family was rebuilt properly. And 5. Marcus laughed through his tears when I told him, "Your first child gets Gordon's name. Somewhere in it. Boy or girl, I don't much care. My husband earned that." "Deal," he said. "All of it." It would be a tidy ending to say I won. I suppose I did. But not the way Tessa expected, and not the way I'd been entitled to. I could have put them on the street and never looked back. Instead, I forced the truth into the open, demanded the respect I was owed, and then, when they finally earned it, I chose grace. That's what power actually is, I've come to think. Not revenge, not punishment. It's the strength to say no when you must, and the wisdom to say yes when you can. 8 months on, my life is unrecognizable in the best way. I cut my hours at the firm and finally started living. I took the train across the country to see Roberta, and we sat on her deck above Okanagan Lake, drinking wine like teenagers. I joined a walking group along the waterfront. I bought a piano and started lessons at 63, 40 years after I gave them up. Marcus quit the side work, sleeps now, has the color back in his face. His counselor helped him see that letting someone help you isn't weakness, it's just being a person. Tessa is finishing her diploma and, to my genuine surprise, has become someone I'm glad to know. She told me once over lunch that she'd grown up, watching her own mother treat people as either useful or disposable, and she was trying to unlearn it. I believe her. She even mended things, partway, with that mother of hers. I'll be honest, because I think it matters. After all of it, I caught myself wondering whether I'd have lifted a finger for them if I'd actually been poor, if I'd had nothing in the bank to fall back on, no leverage, no lawyer. And the answer I came to is that the money was never the point. The cottage just made the disrespect visible. There are people in this world who are genuinely struggling, who have nothing to offer and get treated like nothing because of it, and the measure of a person is how they treat that someone, not how they treat the one who can buy them a lake house. I try to remember that. It's why the women's shelter still gets its check every spring. Last week, a parcel arrived. Inside, a tiny onesie. On the front it read, in soft blue letters, "Grandma's little one," and a card in Marcus's handwriting. "It's a boy, Mom. Gordon James Whitfield, due in the spring. We can't wait for him to meet you." I sat on my couch and cried. the good kind, for a long while. So here is what I learned and what I'll leave you with. Your worth is not measured by what you give to the people around you. It's measured by what you'll allow yourself to accept from them. Setting a boundary isn't cruelty. Sometimes refusing to be walked on is the most loving thing you can do, for them as much as for you. Grace and accountability are not opposites. You can forgive without forgetting, and you can help without erasing yourself in the process. And family, real family, isn't only blood. It's respect. It's the effort. It's still showing up when it would be easier to walk away. If this had been your kitchen, your Thanksgiving, your son staring at the floor, what would you have done? Would you have fought for what was yours, or walked away from them for good? I'd truly like to know, so leave it in a comment below. Thank you for staying with me to the end. And don't you ever let anyone make you forget that you deserve to be treated with respect. For weeks after that night on the dock, I kept circling one question in my head, and it wasn't about the money. It was this: how did a boy I raised to hold doors and write thank you cards end up staring at the floor while his wife called me a beggar? I've come to believe nothing in this story happened by accident. Every piece of it grew out of something planted earlier. Tessa grew up watching her own mother sort people into the useful and the disposable, and she carried that sorting habit into my kitchen without ever questioning it. Marcus took the gift of that cottage and let it curdle into shame, and that shame drove him to work himself half to death and lie to the woman he loved. Cause and effect, all of it. You plant contempt, you harvest a ruined Thanksgiving. You plant secrecy, you harvest a marriage built on a story that was never even true. What pulled us out of that wreckage wasn't luck, and it certainly wasn't me being soft. It was three things working together, and I think about them often now. The first is that I refused to lie about right and wrong, even to keep the peace, even to keep my son. When I told Daniel I wanted Marcus to grow a spine, what I really wanted was for everyone at that table to be held to the simple standard I'd held myself to my whole life. You treat people with respect, full stop, whether they can buy you a lake house or not. That standard is the only thing that made forgiveness mean anything later. The second is that I used my head when my heart wanted to either collapse or burn the whole thing down. I'm an actuary. I've spent 31 years turning panic into numbers on a page. So instead of begging Marcus to love me, I sat down with the title, the bank records, the timestamps. I let the facts do the arguing. Cleverness without decency is just cunning, I know that. But decency without the wits to protect yourself is how good women end up in nursing homes they didn't choose, signed there by children who never knew their worth. And the third is plain endurance. I drove that dark highway alone. I sat through that mediation while Tessa called me sad and lonely and watched my own son go gray. I didn't fall apart, not because I'm made of stone, but because I'd buried a husband and raised a child alone, and I knew I could survive one more hard thing. Standing your ground is exhausting. Most days you want to give in just to make the shouting stop. The work is staying upright long enough for the truth to surface, and it did surface in a highlighted line on a bank statement at 6 in the evening. So if you take anything from Helen and Marcus and even from Tessa, let it be this. Be the kind of person who'd help a stranger who has nothing to offer you, because that's the real test. Be smart enough to keep your dignity intact while you do it. And be tough enough to hold a boundary even when the person crossing it is the one you love most in the world. Those three together are what turn a betrayal into a beginning.